This week's composer's story is about Haydn. Little Joseph Haydn loved music. In the evening after work, his father Matthias liked to play the harp. Joseph would sit on his tiny wooden stool with two pieces of wood in his hands. They were his pretend violin. He longed to play a real one. One day in 1738, a visitor came to Joseph's house. It was Matthias's cousin, Frank. He was a schoolteacher who also arranged music for his local church. Joseph loved listening to him play the violin. After supper, Father Haydn and cousin Frank played together, and Joseph pretended to play with them on his pieces of wood. When Joseph went to bed, cousin Frank said, "Joseph is a bright boy. He keeps perfect time and has a lovely voice. He should have music lessons. Let him come and live with me, and I will teach him how to play the violin and how to sing." Joseph's mother and father were sad to let their little boy leave home, but they packed his bags and waved as 6-year-old Joseph left happily for cousin Frank's house in Hamburg. It was hard work. Joseph had to study books, learn to sing with the other boys in cousin Frank's school, and practice the violin and the clavier, a keyboard instrument, something like a piano. At home, Joseph's mother made sure he was always clean and neat, but here, nobody looked after his clothes. Sometimes they got dirty, however hard he tried to keep them clean. Joseph hated that. He didn't get enough to eat either, and he was often hungry. But soon he forgot his hunger when he was singing with the others in church, wearing his special choir boy wig. One day, an important visitor arrived at the school. He was looking for a boy to sing in his cathedral choir and had heard about the talented young Joseph. The visitor's name was Mr. Reuter. All the boys sang for him. Soon it was Joseph's turn. On the table was a bowl of cherries. Joseph kept looking at them as he sang. At the end, Mr. Reuter said, "You have a lovely voice. I will choose you. As soon as you are 8, you must come and sing in the choir at St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna." And he popped some cherries into the hungry little boy's mouth. Joseph had never seen anything as magnificent as St. Stephen's Cathedral, but now he had to work even harder. His voice was so good that soon he was singing all the solos. Sometimes when the service was over and the choir boys were going back to school, Mr. Herman the baker would call to them, "You sang very well today, Joseph. Come inside and taste my fresh raisin buns. What a treat!" By this time, Joseph was composing music in his head. He wanted to write it down, but he didn't know how. While the other boys were playing games together, Joseph would study alone. One day, an invitation to the palace came from the Empress Maria Theresa. She wanted to hear the boys sing. After singing, the boys went for a walk in the palace garden. Builders had left some ladders there. "Race you to the roof," cried Joseph, and they all began to climb. "Come down at once," called an angry voice. It was the Empress. "Never do that again. It is far too dangerous." The boys hurried down. The next week, when the boys returned to the palace, Joseph looked at the ladders again. He loved climbing. "Race you to the top," he cried, and up he went. But no one else climbed with him. "How dare you?" It was Mr. Reuter. "Disobedient boys must be punished." Joseph was still trying to write music. Mr. Reuter would not help him. "Haven't I enough to do?" he thundered. "Writing music for the royal family?" In desperation, Joseph wrote to his father and mother. They did without food for a week to save enough money for 2 music books. Night after night, Joseph would read as the others slept. Joseph was unhappy. His voice had changed. His little brother Michael was singing the solos now. Joseph was bored. He saw a pair of scissors. He picked them up and snip! He cut off the ponytail of the boy in front of him. Mr. Rooter was so angry that he sent Joseph away from St. Stephen's. Joseph stood outside the gates of the school. It was cold and dark, and he had nowhere to go. "Hello, Joseph Haydn. What are you doing here at this time of night?" It was his friend, Mr. Spangler, who used to sing at St. Stephen's. Joseph told his friend what had happened. "You can come and stay in my house if you like," offered Mr. Spangler, "but I can't afford to feed you. You will have to play your violin to earn some money for your food." Everyone loved Joseph's music. Then one day, a letter arrived from a prince inviting him to live in his palace at Esterhazy and conduct his orchestra. In the summer, the prince stayed at his country palace. The musicians longed to go back to their families in the city. "How can we ask the prince to let us go home?" they asked Joseph Haydn. So Joseph started to write some special music. That night, as the prince was listening to Joseph's new music, one of the musicians got up, bowed to the prince, and walked away. "Very strange," thought the prince. Then another musician got up and left, and then another. "Oh, I get the message," said the prince. "What a lovely way to ask for a vacation." And he ordered the coaches to take the musicians home immediately. The musicians loved Joseph and called him Papa Haydn. At one of his concerts in London, Joseph noticed some people falling asleep because it was late at night. Joseph was not very pleased, so he wrote a quiet, pretty tune that made the audience sleepy. But in the middle, he put in a loud crash that woke them up with a start. Everyone laughed at the joke and stayed awake to enjoy his music. It was Papa Haydn's surprise. Joseph Haydn wrote 104 symphonies. Many of them had names. Here are some of them: the bear, the drum roll, the letter, the hen, the farewell, the clock, and the surprise. And if you are watching this video on Facebook, linked in the comments are 2 links for some listening. One is the Surprise Symphony, and the other is a remix of the same song. So enjoy.